Is it going?
You want to start the poll as well?
You want to start live now?
Yeah, I can deal with it.
Yeah. We have sound too?
We're up, right?
I think so.
Welcome, guys. We're just going to give you about 2 to 5 minutes or so to get your things together, get comfortable, grab your bottles, and we're going to let everyone join in. I know we're a couple minutes behind, so it shouldn't be too long.
While people are getting out, we're
Working.
together. Hey, Ryan. Wow. It's
Not-
going to go over great.
You don't run into a lot of people in the cellar. It's me and Mike.
That'll be an interesting aspect of this.
No need to quarantine.
How are you guys doing? Nice hat.
Hey, thanks. I like my shirt though, really. I mean, if we were going to talk about my outfit, my shirt's really pulling it together.
We just did a
What did you guys do last day or two?
just did a
What's
little
in your last-
trip.
Pinot country.
Yeah, we actually had some business near Paso Robles, but we had a little downtime, so we ran out to the coast. You know, it was cool because I don't know. I guess the wines remind me more of our wines. You get biased, of course. You start loving your own wine style. So we ran out to Cambria.
Super
and,
cool.
Santa Cruz. You know, classic Pinot Noir country is beautiful. Yeah, it was freezing.
Yeah, they were doing some Rieslings out there,
Yeah.
surprisingly enough. So it's cold.
We also ran down to Los Olivos and Solane.
Yes.
And went to the infamous Industrial Eats.
Beef,
Yeah.
tongue, pastrami,
Yeah.
ribbon.
Yeah. Really good.
If you got
Beef tongue. Yeah, we shared one. Just
It's the light.
Neither of us were gonna-
light little
we weren't even hungry. We were like, we gotta get this thing.
Gail said you can't hear it on Facebook.
Can't hear
Not at all.
That's what she said, yeah. Can't hear.
Can you ask her whether it's low level or no sound at all?
Then we went to Barrel Works. Picked up a bunch of sour beers, Firestone Walker.
Yeah.
You went to Firestone in Paso?
No, the
No.
Barrel Works facility.
Oh, yeah, right.
Buellton.
Yeah. Yeah.
Their sour beer spot.
YouTube not working.
No sound, you guys.
I'm getting people that say the opposite.
So maybe it's just her.
She says it's low.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Gail, can you hear us?
Hi.
Zoe? Let me highlight my daughter who's overtly social.
Again, just to give you guys a heads up, we're just giving everyone a minute or two to gather their things and for us to allow everybody to join in. We'll make sure to speak up so you guys can hear us.
Maybe we should kill that music all the way as well, Nick.
Hey. Hi, Lacey. We got some people coming up. Huh?
Very low sound.
So what are we picking up sound from? Just the phone there?
Yep.
Yeah. We're gonna have to think about that in the future.
As possible.
Pick it up.
All right, everybody. Hopefully, those of you logged on, I'll talk a little bit louder. Maybe you guys can respond to me asking you about the sound when I talk at this level.
We're on a little bit of a delay, so just working these kinks out for you guys, and we'll get going here in the next minute or two. In the meantime, if you guys are able to have 3 wine glasses per guest, we are going to taste through each wine individually, but this set of 3 wines is basically a educational approach to this. If you don't have extra glasses, you should be just fine, and we'll taste through them one by one. So.
Yeah, maybe just if you're able to do a 180 with that, I think it'd be better. Kind of distracting.
Jeff Hendricks joining the show.
Whoa, Hendrix.
Ah,
Otto,
we know her.
Who's that?
might know her a little bit. Lacey Brown.
Yeah,
asking about some sour beers.
Creaky Bones.
Creaky Bones.
We stopped at a Del Taco in Tehachapi on the way back, and we pull up to the little speaker, and there's this taped on sign that says, "No French fries, drinks, no meat."
No chicken, no meat.
And I was like, so do you have other meats? The guy goes, "No meat, nothing, end of story, period." And I was like, why are you guys open? What are you selling? You know, so I guess you can get like chips.
If I was 15 and worked at Del Taco in Tehachapi, I'd probably be pretty short fused too.
But it's interesting that the supply line somehow for Del Taco. We go to Subway, which is closed.
And we're picking all the good places to eat. Road food.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Chris Smith joining in.
Oh, what's up,
Hey,
Smithers?
Chef Smithers from Merck in Osteria.
It's chilly down there.
How we doing on sound, guys? Can we get a little feedback from you on how that is?
The peanuts we mixed out there, very aromatic.
Someone on here calling me Lukey.
Oh, the lab phone. You can also close that slider, Nick, when you come back out.
That's actually my mom. Hey, Mom. She is tuned in from Nelson County, Virginia, just out of Charlottesville. So
She can call you
nice,
if she wants.
nice to be in touch. She's the only one.
Yeah. Up till now.
So Lauren's telling us good on sound, just okay at best. So if we can just do our best to project, guys.
Right. You know,
Should be.
maybe next round we get some mics.
Absolutely.
I want to see a boom mic, coming into frame, like the production quality.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Dolo mics.
Accidentally comes in all the time.
You guys, we're gonna dive in here in the next minute or so. In the meantime, if you want to grab extra glasses, as you can see over here, we have 3 glasses per taster. If you don't happen to have 3, no big deal. We're gonna taste through them consecutively, but being able to taste and smell them side by side is gonna be a nice kind of eye opener in the differences and the nuances with these wines. Still figuring out our sound, just a touch. Bree Nation.
There's Bree. There's the assistant winemaker here.
Hey, Bree, thanks
Hey, Bree.
for cleaning while we were gone. Looks great.
Jesse Peterson, Gail Glonsky, another request to get our volume up. Is there any way that we can, hey Nick, is there a way for us to get our volume up at all that you can think of?
At this point, probably not.
Show you the mic that I brought.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
what
sure
we'll
we
do
do that next time.
next time.
Well, you guys drink anything good in quarantine? Any standouts?
That's about all I've been doing.
Yeah. Oh, well, on our trip, it was, classic eye-opening. We were out there. We met up with some friends that work for the industry, and we had a couple bottles of wine, and the wine they brought was just over-extracted and sweet, and I think ours showed really nice and subtle. And
Of course, meanwhile, they were probably going, God, these Arizona wines are so light and thin.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we were definitely felt like, Paso wines are so rich and sweet.
Yeah.
And we were like, whoa. And we were sharing theirs. And we had a rosé of ours and something else.
yeah. Burning Tree Livette.
Yeah.
Nice little Barney Tree plug there.
Gotta get in every now and every way I can.
Yeah, we drank some good beers. We ate some great food. It was, it was really kind of inspirational to think about what we can do to up the ante out here, kind of keep up with the Joneses. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how we work out the sound in this.
Yeah, we're getting thumbs up on sound, so we should be good at this point. So at this point, I just want to welcome everybody who's joining us. This is kind of a new world for us. We're really excited by this, but we're also clearly taking on the hurdles as they come. I'll be following along with all your guys' comments and so on. So if at any point you guys have any questions, any statements, fire them off our way, and we'll take them as we can. For any of you guys who don't happen to have the wines, you don't have to be drinking throughout this. You can be drinking whatever. We are going to be talking about a lot of just general wine topics as well that may be of good interest to you as well. So I would like to introduce these gentlemen here with me, both very close friends of mine. To my right here is Corey Turnbull. He is our head winemaker here at Page Spring Cellars. He runs the whole team down here in the cellar, which is where we happen to be right now. Corey is also the founder and co-owner of Burning Tree Cellars, which is a winery in Old Town Cottonwood. To our right is Eric Glomsky, probably the most recognizable of the three of us. Eric is the founder, visionary, and owner of Page Spring Cellars, along with some of his family members, but definitely the driving force behind this place and the mason from the ground up. These guys are going to tease me the whole time, but I'm used to it.
Call me a
It's
visionary.
Ooh, yeah.
This
This guy's my boss. We'll just leave it at that. So I have to call him nice things like visionaries on live camera. This is really exciting for us. This is our second real session of doing these virtual wine tastings with you guys, and we are going to continue to do this for at least the rest of this month. There's been a lot of excitement and engagement, so there's a decent chance that we're going to continue this program beyond that, even once things kind of settle back down here. I mean, at this point, anything in our intro, guys?
Super excited for this tasting. I mean, how often do you get to try, the same wine on a bunch of different oaks?
Yeah, absolutely. We got someone just right off the bat asking us if we're supposed to be 6 feet apart. Maybe.
Well,
I mean, it's one of those things where our circle is pretty tight knit, and we've kept it that way. But this place, we can't just leave it alone. This winery, and so we've been working side by side throughout all of this, and we've basically had to. We've made a lot of adjustments and changed a lot of our practices here, but in general, we are kind of going about our needed movements here, but trying to do so responsibly and wisely.
I would just think about it like your own immediate family. We have a small, tight-knit group here, and we're together all the time. Corey and I are working and tasting together all the time, and so it's if you go out with your spouse and kids, it's kind of the same thing here.
Mike Bigford, how you doing, man? It's a good friend of ours joining in right now, who is one of the backing forces behind all those festivals down in the valley, in Tucson, Flagstaff, all over the state. Good buddy of ours. So just to give you guys a heads up on what we're going to do here today, we are going to simply put, taste through 3 different wines. Any of you guys who don't have these wines, just so you know, there are going to be a lot of people following who have these same wines in front of them in their home. We're going to taste through each one of these individually before we kind of go to a side-by-side comparison. Any interaction is welcomed. We'll kind of open up at times for some questions from you guys, but feel free to shoot them our way at any point. We got someone already asking where your tape measure is from last time.
I didn't want to overplay that one. I've got a new trick ready coming up here pretty soon.
You heard that joke.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was going to say too. So, Corey, do you maybe want to, either one of you guys, and maybe both of you, want to just tell us about why we would do something like this and kind of what, we don't have to go too far into the wines, but the idea behind what is happening right here, simply put.
Well, we make a lot of decisions every year. I don't know, for those of you who are familiar with our wines here at Page Springs, we don't utilize a lot of new oak, but we want our wines to speak of place and the vineyards they're grown in, the soils they're grown in, and we can oak all our wines very easily and make them all kind of taste like a wood barrel. But I think that really takes away from place and more leaves a mark on what we're doing to it rather than what nature gives us. That being said, so whenever we want a little bit of something, we can use a certain type of oak, and I think it's fun to share that with people. And pertaining to why we did it with Dos Padres Syrah, I think Syrah is one of the red wines you can oak pretty heavily without overpowering the fruit. So we picked our Dos Padres Syrah for this particular wine. I haven't had these wines since we bottled them, so this is kind of exciting for me.
Definitely one of our bigger Syrahs, if not the biggest one we make.
Yeah, and on that note too, we oak these a little bit more aggressively than we normally would our other wines. So, because we wanted you guys to taste the difference in the oak. So all the wines start out as a pick 2 Dos Padres Syrah. We added about 50% oak profile on each particular wine, and then they set in barrel for about 18 months, and then we bottled them about 1 year ago. So these are about a year old right now. So they should be ready to drink, and they should be pretty tasty.
Yeah, I actually hadn't tasted these wines until around noon today, and I tasted them at a barrel, but not at a bottle, and it's pretty exciting to see. To give you guys a heads up at home, the order that we are going to taste these wines, we are going to start with our French Oak Syrah. Again, it's the 470 Syrah from Dos Padres. The order that we will taste these in is French oak, Hungarian oak, and then we'll be moving on to the American oak wine. If you guys want to open all three now, it might be a wise move. As you can see, we are just opening ours now. I did have some guests asking me in the days leading up to this about when they should open their bottles. Our wines are pretty good at opening up fairly quickly. Ideally, I would say that we maybe open these up an hour in advance to really let them breathe. You may want to touch on timing of opening wines.
Yeah, it really depends on the wine. I might have said this last session, but a professor of mine at UC Davis once said that each hour of the bottle being open is equal to a year of aging. So, if a wine's really big and ageable, you might want to open it significantly earlier, or prior to you wanting to drink it. So, like this one, honestly, if we really, really had our act together, maybe this would have been nice to open a couple hours ago. But the other thing you can do is kind of just get it going, swirl it a lot, try to introduce as much oxygen as possible. It'll really help open it up. The other thing you can do is warm up your glass a little bit, because the warmer the wine is, the more it's going to kind of push these processes of it, quote unquote, opening up, which honestly are chemical processes. But, back to what Corey said, the rule of thumb is generally you're going to be drinking young white wines fresh right out of the bottle, young rosés fresh right out of the bottle. And then the bigger the wine gets, maybe a Pinot Noir or a Mule's Mistake or a light Grenache here, you wouldn't let breathe that long. On the other end of the spectrum, maybe a Petit Syrah, you'd open even hours and hours beforehand.
Yeah, I think that and I'll touch base with the argon and nitrogen, how you can use that as a tool to open up wines later. But I think also it depends on how old the wine is as well. So the fact that this was a big Syrah, and the fact that we did have it in oak for over a year, 18 or 20 months, and it's been in bottle for a year too, this is going to be a little more approachable than, say, something we bottled a month ago. And as these wines get older too, if you're drinking like a really old wine that might have been meant for aging and you open something that's 10 to 15 years old, you don't want it to get a lot of air because it's going to fall apart rather quickly too. So it's very specific on what you're drinking. But for wines like these that are younger, I think they do need a little bit of air, but they should open up relatively soon. I'm getting it.
For me, this is this just continually reminds me of high school science class where you would have a control and then kind of move on from there. Now, granted, all these have different influences, but it's essentially the same wine as a base that's showcasing the differences in these. So, you know, if you want to think about it in that manner, that these are essentially kind of the same wines with the different influence of oak, just directly onto them. We already got people loving them. If anyone's just joining us, we are starting off with our French oak Syrah, Dos Madres Syrah. It's the 2017 vintage.
What if I add something real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Just to reiterate something Corey said, again, this is the exact same wine. It was from the same grapes, fermented all at the same time. And the only difference here is that this wine was aged in different oak barrels. So the variable is simply oak aging. And, you know, just so it doesn't confuse you, Corey also said it's 50% oaking. If you don't understand what 50% oaking means, essentially we have our own metric, okay? If we put a wine in a brand new oak barrel, the first use, and that wine's in it for a year, that's 100% new oak, okay? If that wine's in it for half a year, it would be 50% new oak. Or if the wine was in a 1 year, then it's 50% new oak. So just, it's kind of our own internal metric about concentration. It's kind of like cooking, you know, what's your dosing, how much you're adding of any one ingredient. Oak is essentially an ingredient, but it's measured for us in time and percentage. Does that make sense, more or less?
I always look at oak like you say, an ingredient. Like grapes are the raw ingredient to me. Oak is like different spices you can use, different characters you can augment the fruit with. And going back to like what our style is, I think grapes are the raw ingredient. And I think, you know, oak is just to touch that and to highlight it. And a lot of people, in our opinion, we feel like a lot of places just use like people overseas in their
If
state.
oak is the first thing you get on the wine, again, back to our philosophy, you know, just relative to our own, if oak's the first thing you get, we're, on one of our wines, we're not happy because we feel like our wines are about grapes and places, not a place where the tree was grown, although we'll talk about that a little more later. But oak really ought to fit in and be a supporting, play a supporting role, not a dominant one.
Quick shout out to Rod Keeling, who's just joining us.
Oh.
A good buddy of ours at
Hell of a
Winemaker,
Hell of a
Hell of a Pilot. Tyler Makovich, brother of mine, welcome. We will again continue to try to speak up so that you guys can hear us well.
And we will invest in better sound equipment for our next round.
Not too much.
So we have a question whether we are always aging our wines in oak versus other wood. Eric, want to take that?
Sure. Most of the time, yes. So, but the thing you have to realize, in fact, you can even kind of see it around us. If you see the numbers on the ends of the barrels, the first number is the year we started using that barrel, and the second number is the barrel number. So if it says, if it says 0925, it's the 25th barrel of 2009, okay? And in year one, we say 100 flavors, year two, 50, year three, 25, year four, 12 and a half, and by the fifth year, we say it's neutral. So most of our barrels, if you look around here, we're aging wines in them and they're neutral, so we're not imparting oak flavors. 99% of our barrels are oak, okay? We have a small amount of acacia, and acacia, excuse me, initially we brought in to age white wines in because we thought those acacia flavors would kind of harmonize and fit in well with the white wines, but we've also found that we really like it on Syrah, for instance. So, you know, and then last but not least, we do age wines in stainless steel. Wines aged in steel versus oak tend to age much more slowly, whereas oak, because it breathes, they age much quicker. So basically, yes, almost all oak, a little bit of acacia, and then some stainless steel. Stainless steel is definitely more on whites than reds, but sometimes red too.
And I think to add to that too, I think oak itself as a species lends itself to the porosity, if you will, the way it allows the wines to breathe and oxidize. I think oak is a good carrier for that versus other more dense woods. Other than oak, and the fact that oak is relatively, I think, cheaper to produce, and trees grow very big, so on and so forth. I think pine would be another good one, but it's too resinous, and yeah. So I think oak is just the natural aging vessel that allows us to, soften our wines over time as the best wood.
Ended with that. The best one. Chris Babin joining in.
Babin.
He was involved.
Yeah,
he was
Babin used to
back in the
work here
early
years
days.
ago.
Yeah, he's saying stop being so serious. Just get going, man.
Yeah.
Just need a little more booze in us, really.
So you want to talk about French oak in particular?
Yeah, do you,
You should.
I mean, if, so we can just get you guys drinking as well. But do you want to just kind of summarize our philosophy of oak down into about 60 seconds or so?
Yeah. So you guys at Page Springs, and again, this isn't necessarily good or bad or right or wrong. Our house style and our oak philosophy is minimalist. Like Corey already said, we're trying to make wines that are about places and grace. Having said that, if you've ever taken a tour here that I've led, I'll almost always say these two things. An old mentor of mine in the Santa Cruz Mountains when I used to make wine said, you knew you did a great job with oak if you'd only all of a sudden stripped the oak out and it was gone and it wasn't as good. That's what you're trying to do. It's like using salt. If you're salting a dish, the idea of using make it
Overall steam, but because we made so much wine last year, I have no room in the barrels to breweries and stuff, trying to get some free beer out of it.
it's important.
I'm not lying. That's true. It's so true.
Let's talk about this wine.
Yep. All right. So hopefully all of you guys have our French oak Page Springs Cellars Dos Padres Syrah in your glass. No need to pour any of those other wines yet. Right off the bat, what I would like to do with you guys is actually go through more of a formal tasting than we've done in the past, and actually fully assess this wine. I know that color is probably not the biggest talking point when we're tasting three Syrahs side by side that are very similar. They're the same wine with different oak influence, obviously. So
Different dresses.
there you go.
You like it?
Kim's asking if we're starting with the French. Yeah, we are starting with the French. If I misspoke, we are starting with the French oak wine. Maybe I'll hand it over to you guys, and if you guys want to, I'll jump in as well. But if you want to just start assessing the aromatics on this one.
Yeah.
Well, I can start with like the base stuff. I think Dos Padres Syrah, it gives us more of like a northern Syrah kind of feel than say our House Mountain fruit. I think there's definitely a lot of black cherry fruit, more earthy characters, more pronounced tannin, so on and so forth. Definitely the richer side of the two. All limestone, mostly with some volcanic influence as well. I love the Dos Padres Syrah because I'm kind of a hedonist at heart. And when we had the opportunity to do this, I just had a lot of fun with it. Pertaining to French oak in particular, Eric, I'll have to talk about the French oak, and maybe I'll take the Hungarian or whatever.
And did you want to talk about the nose, Luke?
Yeah, I mean,
Before, generally speaking, you guys, you look at the color first. And Luke's right; they're all similar. One of the things we like to do when we're being geeky and trying to analyze things, we'll put the wine against a white background. That's a great way to assess it. And if you tip it, that way you kind of thin out the wine against the side of the glass and look through it. It'll give you a better idea of the color. Because the challenge, of course, is the more full your glass is, it looks different. So, take a look at it off to the edge a little bit. And this has got a classic Syrah character as far as color. And because it's youthful, you're not seeing any bronzing or any oranging or browning on it yet, which you will see over time, which can be quite beautiful. It really depends on the wine. And then, after we kind of look at it, we look for flaws, we look for cloudiness, we look for issues with, a lack of clarity, essentially, which is obviously much more prevalent on rosés and white wines. You have a lot more, you have a bigger range of acceptability in the clarity of a red wine versus whites or rosés, for instance.
I'm more hues too.
And you can go into details about the types of colors. I don't think we'll do that today. But basically, you know, this is pretty much textbook Syrah here as far as coloring you.
Yeah, the visual component of tasting is something that a lot of people just jump right past because we take our vision for granted. When I believe you've gone through this program as well. I know Corey and I have. Is when you go through the Court of Master Sommeliers and you learn the deductive tasting method of tasting through wines, you know, the first thing you're doing is you're assessing this, and it may seem silly to say, hey, that's red wine, but that is a big part of it, and it's also, I mean, if you think about people who may not be able to see that wine and still want to consume it, there's also a lot more to it, as you can look for bubbles, you can look for aging, you know, indications of
Premature aging.
So we do, a lot of us take that for granted, but it is a big part of it. Want to start?
Get our noses in there?
Yeah, get your noses on in there and start throwing out
And right away, black cherry.
black cherry.
Classic Syrah character.
Mocha, dark chocolate.
Yeah. Little baking spice, cinnamon-like. There's like a dusty baking spice character.
I got a bit of like a cocoa powder.
Yeah. Like a dustiness, like a mace or a.
I think there's some kind of classic herbality, herbiness of this. There's, you know, dry, sagey. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got Jennifer Lang mentioned vanilla on the nose there.
You know what? A classic trait of French oak.
Yes.
So,
Classic.
you know, if we're going to, take a look at the oak influence here, the two big things you think about with oak influence are what does it do to the nose and what does it do to the palate. And our choice at times in the cellar will have to do with that more than anything. Let's say if we taste a wine that's lacking some richness on the palate, you know, and when we talk about it, we say front, middle, or finish. So when it's really a timing thing. You put the wine in your mouth and you taste it. The front is that, but of course the finish is the lingering part of it. If we feel like it's thin there, we're going to lean more towards Hungarian or American oak, which you'll see here in a little bit, rather than French. French tends to boost up the vanilla and aromatics, and it also tends to bring more tannin to the table. So the French oak just happens to have more tannins for these types of acids that give you that dry feeling in your mouth. So often, let's say we taste a wine and we're like, oh, use a little more tannin or dryness per se, we go right to French oak. If we want sweetness, we'll go right to American oak and everything in between.
American, Hungarian's kind of between. American definitely seems to be the more wood sugar, because this is all about really where they're grown and the grain of the wood. French tends to be the tightest grain of the wood, and you get more tannin, you get more astringency, those kind of things. So yeah.
And just the nature of the species and the place where it's growing over in France versus, you know, so in the center of France is where a lot of this French oak comes from. Meanwhile, we're going to try Hungarian oak. We'll talk about that. And then in America, in the United States, Missouri, the Appalachians, you know, West Virginia. These are a lot of the places where we get oak from. Missouri, Minnesota, West Virginia, etc. Yep.
Shout out.
Shout out West Virginia.
No, not West Virginia.
Western Virginia. Joe Villegas, who's here with us, a good buddy of, I think, all three of ours, a neighbor of mine as well. He's mentioning different ways to smell. You know, we spoke last time a little bit about one nostril versus the other, or where you're actually getting your aromatics off of this glass. Corey, you want to?
You know, I think you can attack a wine or a glass. I think a lot of times it has to do with the shape of the glass. You know, you're definitely going to get a lot more aromatics because your wine glass and the why wine glasses are shaped this way. They're concentrating the aromatics into a particular spot where you're going to smell it. Sometimes, you know, like me and Eric were doing this out in California too. Like we'll smell like really close up top. We'll put our nose way down in there, but sometimes it's a little too aggressive. You get a lot of the alcohol volatilized and stuff like that. Sometimes when we're finished with the glass and after we drink it, we'll swirl that empty glass and you get all these different like tertiary notes, like all the herbs and the more oak influence.
Dry fruit.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with just the volatility of the different components in your your wine. So the wine is made up of all these different polyphenols, and the oak is vanillin, and all these other things too, and they all volatilize at certain temperatures in certain areas, if you will. And I think it's constantly complex how many different aromatics you can get off just even one glass.
Even as it sits and warms up, that's huge. Because you guys, in this most simplistic way, volatility is just a measure of how tightly things are bound together on a molecular level, right? So when you swirl it, you're breaking molecular bonds, and a low, something that's high volatility is more likely to break off and go up into the glass. So that's what we're doing right now. We're breaking those off, and then we're smelling those as they float around. If we heat it with our hands, what is heat? Heat is vibration on a molecular level. So the more you heat something, eventually those bonds break too. I mean, think about water when it turns to steam, okay? You're disassociating, okay? So you heat it and swirl it, you're more likely to smell more in your wine, for sure.
And then classically, that's why it's so important to have these wines at the right temperature. So if you serve a red wine too cold, and this is classic, if you go to a restaurant, a white wine's too cold, red wine's too hot, what happens? A white wine, those molecular elements are bound together stronger, and then eventually the wine doesn't taste like anything. There is no smell because the coldness is making those wines, those bounded elements stronger. Whereas if you serve a wine too hot, you start getting into the volatility of the ethanol and all these other things, and the wine
Wines definitely smell boozier the warmer they get.
If you serve a wine too hot, it smells like vodka. So really, it's
not our wine. But
no, well,
Burning tree.
if we serve this at 90 degrees, it's going to smell like vodka, folks. Don't care what wine it is.
that was for you, Babin.
Yeah, Babin.
These guys have been drinking wine longer than I have, and I know that that's a fact. And when I was first getting into it, what I would always do is just kind of bury my nose as far into that glass as possible, and take that for what it was. The more I've learned about the aromatics of wine, the more you can get different levels of aromatics from different places within the glass. And it sounds silly, but if you're stuffed up, you may be getting something different from one nostril versus the other based off of all the complexity to the aromatics of wine here. We're being called wine nerds on here.
Thank you.
There's a 9-year-old who calls me Dede, who's clearly watching and commenting. We got that's Elijah on there for sure.
Luke's daughter.
I got one of my daughters. I'm sure the other one's watching as well.
What parent lets their 9-year-old have a Facebook account?
It's on their mom's
Oh,
account.
okay.
So they did open my bottles of wine for me this morning. It was kind of a cool training session. A quick little shout out to Julie King asking about whether our wine is solar powered.
Plug in Burning Tree and Harmony
Yes.
Solar.
Get away, can.
Clearly the vines are solar powered. What's pretty special, or one of the things that really adds to the uniqueness of this place is, yes, this winery is solar powered. So not only is our vineyard obviously solar powered, so is everything else happening here, which is huge. We have been operating at about 85% solar for the last 5 years or so. At this point, are we up and running at 100%?
We are finally up and running.
Yeah, the last month or two, we've been installing the final solar panels, the last kind of stage to getting there.
So you'll see new panels, because we've had the panels in the parking lot that are also a shade structure, and now we have new panels on the main building and our crush pad. And they're actually really beautiful. I don't know about you, I think solar panels are beautiful. I think there's just something about them that's awesome. And, so we're really proud to be 100% solar now.
Leah's giving you crap just for your comment, just giving you a heads
Do you know,
up.
you know who else is powered by the sun? Superman. That's right.
So
I'll just show
do you
this
guys
one away from him.
do you guys want to jump into tasting notes?
On the next wine or finish up this one?
Yep, finish up the finish.
I mean, again, you guys, I'm a really firm believer that the taste experience of wine is unique and it's very personal. So when we're sharing these perceptions, they're just ours. It's just like, looking at a painting and here's what I see. As this wine's warming up and opening up for me, I'm starting to see, more things. Like I've been getting this really nice kind of cinnamon spice. I've been getting licoricey, kind of fennelly anise characters that I also associate with classic Syrah, particularly from the Northern Rhone.
The acid structure.
I got this subtle kind of black peppercorn kind of spice on it. Carol Kenley joining us from California.
Hey, Carol, good to see you.
Mentioning
Good to hear
some
from you.
spice on that as well.
Another kind of neat thing is, if those of you, if you haven't, I'd recommend it. Taste, that the homeland of Syrah is the Rhone River Valley. And Syrah is grown from the south of the Rhone and actually all around southern France and all the way up to the north in Condrieu. And the Syrahs there are special, they're unique. Unfortunately, a lot of them are really expensive, but you can find good examples that won't break the bank, like Crozes Hermitage, for instance. But one of the neat things about those is they get this wonderful dark fruit, anise, dry, and also some dried fruit flavors. And I would actually say Dos Padres. I'm kind of curious your opinion on this. I would say Dos Padres reminds me more of Northern Rhone Syrahs than any Syrah I've had from Arizona and possibly the United States. Like, these really remind me of the Rhone.
Yeah, especially Hermitage, Saint Joseph, Cornas. Yeah, they just get into this brooding black fruit character. A lot of iron influence, a lot of almost, it sounds weird, but like a metallurgy thing. It's like iron ore, crushed ore, on top of the black fruit. Lapidarist. Yeah, we were learning words on our trip.
Not lapodiatrist.
That's not a word, Eric.
We never lean on Corey for pronunciation. So
I can cuss like a sailor, though.
Great fine tannins. Another thing we talked about, you guys, is what is the tannin quality? So again, tannins are a group of acids that are found in grape skins. They're found in grape seeds, and they're one of the really important components of how a wine feels in your mouth. And so it's the dryness, right? And French oak in particular, and this particular Syrah, back to the story of the Northern Rhone, the tannins can have different grain to them. You can have very rough, crunchy, hard tannins. You can have very silky, velvety ones, like some of the ones you get on Pinot Noir. On this here, to me, it's like a fine, dusty powder on the finish.
absolutely.
And I really, really like that. And these are all, I don't know what you guys are eating out there, but these are classic, cheese wines, French soft ripened cheeses, and obviously meats. If you're a meat eater, red meat would be just classic with this. The other interesting thing is that tannins bind with protein. So the more protein you have in your mouth when you're trying these wines, actually the softer they'll seem, because those tannins, which otherwise would hit your tongue and feel very dry, will bind with the proteins in the meat or cheese instead. So if you ever feel like wines are too dry, have something with protein in it next, with them and see how it is.
I gotta say hi to Ian. What's up, buddy?
Lauren Maldonado is comparing this wine to a recent 2014 Hermitage that she had recently, which is a pretty nice wine to be compared to. Mary Seeger, who also happens to be my aunt Munch, tuning in from New Hampshire. Anyone else, we're gonna attempt to continue this program throughout our shipping lull, which is hindered by the Arizona temperatures right now. And reach out to us and let us know how we can get you this wine without it getting spoiled on its way.
So we're in the process too of making some wood boxes, right, on this eventually?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll sell these as a 3-bottle set. So, one of the really cool things is it's great to grab something like this and have a group of people over when you can again and try them side by side, just like we're doing now. Maybe try some food pairings with it. One of our wine club members and kind of one of the heroes of the Arizona wine industry, Bob Lynch, he was the guy, he's an attorney down in Phoenix. He's the guy who helped us basically revolutionize our wine laws in 2006. We still have a lot of work to do, but that was a huge hump. Bob basically bought, I think, he got his neighborhood all kick in, or maybe he bought them for them. You got a case of each of these, and they're all tasting these. They're doing a whole neighborhood, dispersed neighborhood party of these wines right now. So, and this is just so educational, and it's so thought provoking, and it's just great for conversation. Like I'm probably jumping ahead, but I'm already digging on this Hungarian.
Love the Hungarian.
It's so different,
Yeah,
than the French.
get into that just here in 1 second.
Slow down.
It's Andrea Brody and hopefully the rest of the Brodies who are
Hey.
joining us, close friends of ours
We
as
just
well.
went swimming with those guys.
Alexandria Bowler is a friend of mine. He used to make the best cocktails at Cowboy Chow. That we know that name.
Cashmere's or
In Cowboy Chow, yeah. Before we move on to our Hungarian oak, I'd like to just kind of pause this real quick and just do a little toast, a little cheers. We are happy to be here and continuing to work at the winery and clearly drinking together. Not necessarily our ideal circumstance to be drinking wine with you guys, but now's the time, guys. So
yeah, thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for the support.
And the Glowski family rule is if you clank a glass with somebody, you have to look them in the eye.
but their whole thing is that they overdo it.
Hey.
So me and Bree, who also work in the cellar, have been working on this no look.
No look.
Well, I didn't know. I wasn't looking. Nice.
Just kind of takes the sharing
White
of
chocolate.
wine to the next level as far as closeness, people, the human connection, which is definitely a little tattered right now. So the more we can do, that's the great thing about wine. The more we can do to kind of reconnect.
Yeah.
all good.
Yeah, and as Corey mentioned earlier, thank you for the support. It's this has been huge for us to keep things moving and all rolling here. So on that note, if you guys haven't already, please open your Hungarian oak bottle. If you happen to have 3 glasses, what I would recommend doing is leaving some of your French oak Syrah in a glass, and then attempting to remember which is which. So the great thing about having these wines in different glasses is once we taste through these, we're going to start to do a little side-by-side comparison. So what you got Hungarian right here, is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, so again, if everybody can move on to the Hungarian.
And by the way, you guys too, we were talking about different kinds of oak and barrels versus stainless steel. If we put the same wine in stainless steel for the same period of time, it would have a different color too.
Yeah.
So wines that you leave in kind of an anaerobic or low oxygen environments maintain a brighter, fresher hue, and wines in barrels, which do breathe, tend to basically deepen in color because they're oxidizing over time.
The only thing small enough to kind of breathe out of the barrel is alcohol and water. And so we'll put these
But
barrels.
gases move inward.
Yeah, so the wine, everything else that's in there gets more concentrated. I mean, we age some wines up to 2.5, 3 years too, because we want more of that concentration.
The other thing, I tend to do this all the time. I'm gonna be starving by the end of this, but the more I drink these Syrahs, the more I find myself thinking about like lamb or goat or like really seasoned meats.
Cassoulet.
Cassoulet,
Classic.
yeah. Some of the great cheeses out there, like
What's that chicken dish? Coq au vin?
Coq au vin.
Coq au vin is a great Syrah pairing. That's
Coq au vin.
Yeah, I'm not
Probably somebody out there who speaks decent French.
I'm pretty sure it needs chicken and wine.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
All right.
Cotton vin is what that is, man.
But
I love it.
in the Rhone, when I've traveled there, and I've been there a bunch of times, definitely highly seasoned meats and cheeses are the classic Syrah pairings. I'll throw out some cheeses if you guys can find them. Like, for instance, Whole Foods all around the state would probably have some of these. Livarot, really, you have to like punching cheeses to dig on Livarot. Even though it's from Burgundy, Apois, It's a washed rind cheese. It's kind of orangish, super awesome with Syrah.
That's another pretty powerful stinky cheese. I'll hide one in my refrigerator, and then I get yelled at because it stinks so bad. I love that stuff, but any goats too. I mean,
Yeah.
Midnight Moon, Cypress Grove.
Domestically, there's a domestic cheese called Red Hawk that's made in California. Awesome cheese if you can find it. Most Whole Foods sell that and Mount Tam. But I would highly recommend if you have like a little wine fridge, buy the cheese and leave it in there for like 2, 3, 4 weeks. Don't break it. Keep the cheese intact.
Especially soft cheese.
But don't really keep it in the fridge if you can avoid it, because the fridge tends to retard the aging of the cheese. Most really good cheese shops in Paris, for instance, if you go there, are just rooms with these cheeses on shelves. It's not refrigerated because the kind of biology of the outside of the cheese protects it, and the aging process continues on, and you get really beautiful ripe cheeses. So try Mount Tam or Red Hawk after sitting in your little wine fridge, or if you have a real wine cellar, throw it in there for 2, 3, 4 weeks and then try it then, or try it against a fresh one. They're awesome.
Yeah, I can say other than that, off the top of my head, I always love those line washed goat cheeses like Murcia Albino or Drunken Goat. I always love the dryness of those with the dryness of Syrah. It really accentuates the fruit. Yeah.
Those are ridiculous.
Derek, we got your dad on here. I think he's correcting you on how the French oak wine tasted.
Of course.
No, he's just
He's highly educated these days.
yeah.
Oh, he's great.
Terry Glowski, hey man, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hopefully Nisa's with you
That's
too.
great. I want to, that's almost like a Parker. Drink or hold now. Still young.
Let's hear it.
Let's hear it.
All right, Terrence
My
Glowski.
father lives in Chicago, by the way.
French high tannins, masking high alcohol, black currant, spice, vanilla, medium finish, drink now or hold, still young.
I agree with everything.
Me too.
Yeah.
He's still young.
Ken Colburn joining us.
Oh, hey.
Dan.
Yeah, if you guys are ready, let's go ahead and jump into the aromatics on this wine.
Well, do you want to talk about Hungarian first? Or just
Yeah,
let's-
yep, on the wine.
on the wine, this particular wine.
Yeah.
I mean, just right off the bat, I immediately get a bit of a sweeter aromatics. I think that there's this kind of floral side to it. And I feel like maybe I'm jumping to that as a nuance, but I do immediately get a little bit of a sweeter, almost like honeyed aromatics on top of it. You guys want to take
Yeah.
aromatic notes from here?
And I'll just add, I agree. I especially encourage people to, go back and forth between them for a little contrast. I get this kind of sponge sugar, egg cream. It's funny when you start to think about it's your smell, but sometimes you can almost think about it texturally.
Mhm.
Like I'm like, oh, there's this creaminess to it immediately to me that's different than the French. And when I go back, the French really notice more of the characters in the French because I've got this for contrast,
Absolutely.
which we do in our analytical tastings here all the time.
Yeah, the baking spices comes out in the French more.
So
That
if we,
smells like creme brulee or something.
if we can just stick to the Hungarian for now, and then on the back end, we'll start to do a little more side by side. The smoothness that you're mentioning. I mean, when I first smelled the French oak wine, I got this cocoa powder. This one, I get a kind of a cocoa influence, but I swear I get more of like this milk chocolate. And I don't
Milk
think
chocolate's good.
I've actually ever used milk chocolate to describe wine.
Like milk chocolate covered almond. I always get an almond character with Hungarian oak, especially in whites, but a little bit here.
Another thing, you guys, I said this in the last session, but quick 15-second blurb. These wines will seem, even though it's the same wine across and it's a little more tannin in the French, the more you taste red wine, and this is a seem sequentially because you experience tannin fatigue. And in fact, when we do our analytical, we stagger everybody's start point. So if we were doing an in-house tasting here to blend, I would start on wine 1, Corey would start on wine 2, Luke would start on wine 3, Because if we all went 1 to 3, everybody's going to think the third wine's more tannic than the first, and it's a problem when you're trying to blend. So just remember too that the more you taste these, the more you hit your tongue with tannins, the more the proteins in your saliva bind with those tannins, and you overwhelm your salivary protein production, the more these wines are going to seem more tannic. So if they start to seem drier and more tannic, and you have some food around, nibble a little bit of food, maybe drink some water, close your palate, and then go back in.
That's great.
These are pretty serious wines, you know, and funny that Terry jumped in. So my father's name is Terry. Vineyard is called Dos Padres. The land is actually owned by my father and my stepfather. So just a little quick background and the naming of this.
What are you guys getting on this wine? You guys got a preference? Hungarian versus French?
Yeah, that's a serious wine.
It's delicious. I was actually really blown away by this wine when tasting it earlier today.
You know, stylistically too, you guys, you can see that we don't go for this really sweet, fleshy character. We go for more structure and more definition. I remember one time years ago, I was pouring, actually another wine club member, Mike Pavon, would do this benefit in Tucson every year. And Ken Calkin was pouring wines next to us, and he tried one of the Syrahs we made, and I remember going, God, Eric, your wines are so precise. You know? I'm not sure whether it was a compliment or a criticism, but we definitely make wines that are less, you know, like they're not built for comfort per se. You know, it's not a big soft chair. It's something that's really elegant and a little more structured and defined. And that's definitely our house style for sure.
Linear.
Yeah.
Very food friendly, I could say. A lot of times those hedonistic, higher alcohol wines are great to have when you're
With a cigar.
Yeah, with a cigar, you're partying with your friends, but really I think the magic of wine is when you have the ability to eat with it, and it makes the dish better, it makes the wine better. You find those perfect pairings, and I think one of the most important things in wine is not just the alcohol, it's not just the sugar, it's not just the fruit. Acid is so important. And I think that's true in foods that we eat. I think in all kinds of things that we put into our body. We love acidic things because of...
Why is a margarita so great? It's all about acid.
It's not sugar.
Acid. It's lime juice.
It's the tequila.
Citric acid. So we would dig on the palate a little bit?
Yeah,
maybe?
absolutely. So we're going to move on to tasting notes on the Hungarian Oak Syrah at this point.
I mean, to me, I find this just a little broader and a little more soft and ever so slightly sweeter than the French oak. I feel like the French oak was even more structured, and this is, I feel like there's a little bit of a coating over everything with this, you know?
I think sometimes too, I get a little more, and I don't know if this sounds weird, but it seems like the fruit is slightly tinged to a little bit more red than black.
That's super weird.
Way that is sales.
Sorry, I've been doing it for years. So being wrong, no, I get more like a slight, not so much black cherry, but a little more going into the red cherry fruit. I think the Hungarian, the sweetness kind of coats it, going back to like your milk chocolate kind of note, chocolate covered cherry kind of thing, with less tannin, a little more hedonistic. I mean, both of these are a lot of fun. I think they're both great wines, but I kind of prefer the Hungarian personally.
Yeah, I know we're not supposed to compare, but I feel like going back to the French is just a little more resinous and is a little more green on it, which I think is really cool. This one definitely is more, I feel like the Hungarian is accenting the fruit more than the French oak is, personally. And maybe it's that little bit of into sweetness too.
So maybe you guys can expand on this, but I feel like I'm getting a kind of like a citrus, tangerine, kind of orange building block on the palate here. Are you guys getting anything like that?
I'll comment on that. And so we taste together a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel like, back to the uniqueness of everybody's palates, I feel like you get stone fruits and orange, like peach, nectarine, and then some of the oranger side of citrus. mandarin, orange, more often than I do. But when you point it out, I definitely find sympathy, with that.
Yeah.
Like if you hadn't said it, I probably wouldn't have noticed that.
On the palate.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the palate, I get a little bit of this, like vanilla and orange, almost like dreamsicle-y kind of thing.
Dried orange peel.
Orange peel.
I get orange peel in Syrah a lot.
Yeah.
Pinot Noir and Syrah. Some people would call, Pinot Noir is supposed to be the apogee of expressing a place on the planet. You guys have heard me say this before. These old timers in Burgundy that I met would say Pinot Noir is the ghost, right? You've heard that whole story because you hold the glass up and you look through the wine, which is lighter in color, and you see the landscape. I really think Syrah is the ghost. It's the Pinot Noir of the South, of the Rhone.
So generally speaking,
We have a whiteboard over there, and somebody's throwing out questions.
This is Corey's one guest appearance on these.
thank God.
Guys, just to finish that thought, though, seriously, I really do think Syrah does a great job of expressing place, albeit with a little more intensity than Pinot Noir. And I also think Syrah, I don't know this for sure, but I feel relatively confident in saying it's got to be our most widely planted red grape in Arizona. I think of every grower I know, and just about everybody has a little bit of Syrah who's commercial. And I think that this is the go-to grape that kind of experienced the Arizona landscape. Rod Keeling, who's watching, his Syrahs are so different than Colibri on the other side of the mountain from him. From, Sam Pillsbury with these silky kind of fruit forward Shirazes from Kansas Settlement near Wilcox, all the way up here to these northern kind of Arizona expressions.
So maybe just for a second, while we're enjoying this wine that I'm super into, do you mind talking a little bit, Corey, about how just like the physical application of oak, not that we know what it makes it taste like, about how is this oak actually applied in these different forms from different countries, and maybe some other options out there that we don't do that are options that we have bypassed, and then maybe why we've gone down that road.
Well, I can talk about, we generally, when the wine comes in at harvest, we're not really thinking oak at that point. We're thinking fermentation science. We're thinking about finishing it, how much alcohol there is, how much acid there is, trying to find that balance. Whether or not we're going to partially leave some clusters intact and leave some stems in the batch. We do that with Syrah quite a bit. We've been experimenting a lot with co-ferments. We have Malvasia co-ferments in there. We with Syrah.
Co-ferments mean that we actually literally ferment white grapes in with the red grapes. But co-ferment doesn't have to be a white grape, but it means multiple grapes fermented together.
Yeah, and usually the whites we use are like Roussanne. Viognier is probably the most traditional, but we've done Roussanne, we've done Malvasia. I think once the wines, harvest is one of those things that you're just trying to get the wine from the grapes from point A to wine point B. And I think once those wines settle down in barrel, we'll press them off the skins once fermentation is complete. We'll let a general first settling happen, and then they'll go into barrel. And early on, since the majority of barrels we have are neutral barrels, we're not thinking about oak at that moment. We let these wines kind of go through malolactic fermentation, and I could go into that, but I'm not going to. It takes too long. Once malolactic fermentation is complete, we put these wines up.
Clearly he wants to. Just,
Sorry.
So we put these wines away, and then then we start focusing on rosés. We start focusing on white wines, and so on and so forth. And then we come back to these reds after they've had a moment to kind of chill out. When it comes to what we utilize a lot of. We buy some new barrels, usually French or Hungarian barrels. We'll buy new, but we also utilize Stavin, which are oak alternates. They're basically the different oak from the different forests that have been cured in these small wood sets, and they basically get fed into the hole of the barrel and we can augment the wine pretty precisely based on, okay, we want this barrel to be 20% new. French oak, we might utilize a 20% stave and set, so on and so forth.
I'm not bad.
Sure.
So, I would say, it's interesting doing these because it kind of gets you thinking about trying to articulate what you do day in, day out, right? I would say that our use of oak is largely adaptive. So rarely, in small areas, we do put a wine right out of fermentation into a very specific barrel. But that's the exception for sure. Usually what we do is we approach it from a neutrality perspective because you want to see the wine as it is prior to starting to manipulate it, muck with it, And so if anything, when we start doing batch assessments, which is after the wine's really calmed down, after primary and secondary fermentation, sat in the barrel for a while, we start assessing these batches. It's then that we go, oh, we think this might need something. And then we'll either add inserts or we'll move a wine out of its existing barrel into another one. So we kind of do this shell game all around the cellar. And the idea is to try to, basically pair up the wine as you get a sense of what it is and what it needs with the right barrel. And you just can't do that early on. And I would actually say, there's a couple serious arts to winemaking, I believe. Clearly, blending is the true art of winemaking, but another one is what, aging and what barrel and what medium do you age a wine in? And I think it's really important to you can completely kill a wine. If you took a really delicate wine and put it in a really strong barrel, you might completely wipe it out. On the flip side of the coin, you may not help a wine reach its kind of highest calling or apogee by by ignoring that a little bit of the right oak in the right place at the right time might be awesome. So this isn't always a wine is aged in a barrel and then it's bottled. This is all malleable, and time and shuffling and moving these things around is hugely important to us, and that happens every year.
Yeah, we're reactionary for sure when it comes to trying to make the best expression of place, and that's probably the simplest way to put it, without hiding that expression of place.
Granted, we do blow it sometimes, but
too much makeup.
Yeah.
For me, it's a lot of my understanding of oak influence on wine has come from working here at Page Springs. And when I first started working here, I know that kind of our philosophy behind all of our wines was that we weren't really influencing them with much new oak at all, and kind of letting the grapes kind of speak for themselves and for their place. We get pretty nerdy about the site variances or when we pick these grapes and so on. And kind of how Eric put it to me originally, and it's always kind of stuck with me, is that this Syrah that's growing up at our Dos Padres vineyard comes out of that vineyard and down into our cellar, just representing that place. And that then when there's oak influence, that influence is typically coming from a different location, whether it's Hungary or France or America, but it is an outside influence on that wine. Kind of retroactively thinking about it, the oak is basically equally as representative of where that's grown as well. It's just when you combine those, it kind of takes away from the place where those grapes are grown, which is what we're more so trying to represent. But over the years that I've been here, a lot has changed here, and the application of oak definitely has. And maybe we'll touch on where that's kind of led us here in just a moment. But whether or not this Hungarian oak is representative, regionally of the wine that it's in, that depends on whether the grapes are grown in Hungary, obviously. But outside of that, the oak also represents terroir in its own sense. So it's kind of cool to think about that.
How do you integrate? How do you accent the terroir? I feel, and it's challenging. When you think about it, what barrels do we really have at our fingertips? I mean,
Yeah.
the U.S. wine industry is dominated by, I mean, the fine and the high end, the fine winemaking in the U.S. is dominated by French oak. So,
New French oak.
yeah, and then American and Hungarian, and certainly, you know, when we think about Arizona, if you want to talk about American oak, the quintessential expression of American oak is bourbon. Okay, bourbons are less defined by place of the grain or even the distiller, and more by the oak they choose and the oaking regime than anything else.
Heavy toasted American oak.
Yeah.
Dill and caramel.
Yeah, sweetness. You know?
Sweetness.
So I mean, that's really the way to look at American oak. Sure.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna, yeah, I shouldn't say any other winery that's really defined by American oak. We don't want to get sued.
Well, let's jump into the American oak.
So it's
So,
like, let's move along.
yeah, I know, am I the mediator or the?
Yeah. The attorney.
I don't know, Luke, you're important. I just want you to know that.
Thanks. So you guys at home, if you guys want to start to move on to the American Oaked Dos Padres 470 Syrah, something that we touched on last session and haven't mentioned now is before you pour that wine in there, you may have noticed us doing this, but we always smell our glasses before wine goes into them because you can get a lot of different influence from what happened to this glass before wine ever went into it. You know,
Did the rinse cycle happen properly in your dishwasher?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of glasses smell a lot like cardboard. There's a lot of kind of like fishy kind of dishwasher smells you can get from them. So, you know, to really subjectively compare these, but at this point, hopefully, just about all of you guys have moved on to American Oaked bottle here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
of course, you do have to do.
And
Classic American to me.
Classic American. So I want to explain I mean, you kind of started to go there, but
Tastes like hot dogs and apple pie.
no.
Tom Petty.
Baseball.
Baseball, that's where I was going. Baseball.
No, I think American oak with its looser grain, it always imparts a sweetness to the wine. I also, you know, that caramely sweetness that you might get in bourbon, there's a little bit of that there. It depends on how much toasted it is, but coconut is a classic. Like toasted coconut is a classic, for me, American trigger. Like I'm like, oh, that's American oak if it's on coconut. If it's not toasted enough, another classic trigger is dill.
Yeah, there's little hints of dill on this.
Yeah, I get dill and coconut and like a sweet caramely character, and right away I'm like, that's American oak. And that's what I smell here.
Yeah, I mean, we don't use a lot of American oak on our wines, but when we do, like we just did a call a few days ago, it's because we feel like a wine generally needs some sweetness to it. And I would say 99% of the time we go, you know, this wine, you know, if you have a juice like cranberry, you add sugar to it, it actually makes it seem more like cranberry. It like heightens the fruit character. That's why, I mean, if you guys, anybody out there digs American Zinfandels, which is one of our iconic, you know, North American wines, Zinfandels and the big Zins out there always have a ton of American oak because it just really heightens that jammy, intense, fruity character. And that's how we use it. I mean,
Yeah.
other than something kind of, you know, where we're trying to juxtapose these different characters, normally we'll use it to sweeten things. You know?
Yeah, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon is another classic American oak, you know, bastion in the United States.
Like you'll rarely see American oak on Pinot Noir.
Rarely.
You know, lighter Rhone varieties. Sometimes in Australia, you'll see big, intense, ripe Grenaches on American oak a lot. And actually, Spanish wines, big Tempranillos, Graciano Tempranillo blends,
South America too.
often have a lot of American oak on it as well.
Yeah, it's funny, and it's always interested me that there's so much French oak influence here, and then the American influence tends to, in the wine world, tends to fall back in Europe. I know that, you know, maybe you guys, this would be just a little discussion, quick one. is, do you feel like in the wine world, American oak is kind of looked at on a lower tier than French and Hungarian oak? I know American oak influence on it. I feel like I just kept finding myself in scenes with well-versed wine drinkers who seem to kind of have judged it and kind of moved past American oak. I absolutely love the Rioja region, and I love the American oak influence on those wines. You guys maybe want to touch on the perception of the, Hungarian versus French versus American, and
I think
quality or value there.
a lot of times because of for me, another one, Argentine influence. For me, I'm not a big American oak fan. It's kind of great for that you don't want to age a long time. I think it's kind of the most less refined of the oaking, I think, wines. But going back to disclaimer. Yeah, don't listen to Corey.
If there's any attorneys out there, Burning Tree Cellars.
Mm-hmm. You guys make enough money, buy it. No, I don't know. I think you're asking why is American oak looked at in a certain way. I can tell you that it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot less use. A brand new American oak barrel might cost us $400 or $500, where a brand new French barrel might cost us up to $1,500. So I think a lot of it just has to do with.
Makes me kind of wonder what an American barrel costs in Spain.
Right.
Because back to what I said,
imports.
I would not generalize about Europe because you're not going to see many French wines on American oak.
Yeah.
But certainly,
Especially, and I probably shouldn't have been saying Europe because it is Spain. What Terry's mentioning here is he's saying that the Spaniards were using American oak because they were at war with these other countries.
Yeah,
The French couldn't get it. That's awesome.
I've read about that as well.
Yeah, that's.
Well, I mean, does it come
makes a
down
lot
to
of
that?
sense.
Is the reason these wines have these oak influence traditionally based on history and politics? And they make these wines. We can't get French oak, so Rioja, for instance, was because those wines are defined by that.
It's relationships developed.
You're right.
I'm not going to add on. I agree. I mean, so number one, we're a capitalistic culture, and any time you have a barrel that costs $500 versus $1,200, $1,500, you're going to have that built-in. This is better, whether that's real or not. Right. So I think I really think that it's part of our way of thinking about value and quality. Obviously, in my opinion, it gets back to intensity and subtlety and elegance. I think American oak is really intense, and I would actually say I think it's kind of iconic. I think it represents our country and our culture. Again, back to bourbon, But look at the wines that are most typically aged strongly in American oak. It's Napa Cabs, Lodi Zinfandels, Napa Sonoma Zinfandels, and I think in those situations it works. It makes sense with those wines. This is by far the most intense oak here. I feel like I see the oak characters. I still see the wine. But I see the oak characters a lot, and certainly the sweetness from the unfermentable wood sugars that we're getting. I get things like marshmallow, circus peanuts as well, like really
Hedonism.
Yeah, and I think so. It's almost like a class thing. It's a money thing. It's a class thing. But the most expensive wines in our country are aged on American oak.
Yep.
So
Teach their own.
Each their own.
I think another thing too, this might be risky, but I'll go ahead and say it. As people get older, this is just a fact. As people get older, their senses diminish. And if you look at the demographic of people who buy the most expensive Napa Cabs, they're generally people who are in their late 60s, 70s, 80s.
So the wines they truly enjoy are Petite Syrah.
Yeah, and these
Jam
wines are more
rich,
intense
yeah.
because that's what appeals to them, and then, somebody who's,
You're gonna probably get in trouble.
I am, I'll just end right there.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be the only one saying shit like that.
Any of you guys who are asking us questions that we aren't getting into, we will make sure to come back around to you. So just giving you a heads up. One question that just completely applies immediately is, these are all state sets, am I correct? We're doing something like this, which is kind of an education-based presentation. I don't want to expose us on this. I don't want to experiment with these things. If we went the whole barrel route, we would just be putting all of our eggs into one basket, essentially, and not giving ourselves a chance to, make alterations.
I'm gonna add real quick. You have to realize there's a huge difference between putting wine in a stainless steel tank and putting a bunch of oak chips or staves in it versus barrels. The reason we age in barrels breathe and allow the wine to interact with the environment over time, and it changes the wine in a very metered and one of the really, really important things about staves is that it allows us to move them very quickly. And back to our house style is not oak intensive. I personally really tasting, like we just recently had a wine on oak for all of 2 weeks. And Corey and I tasted it. I was like, dude, I think that's an amazing thing to be able to do. And it's amazing to be able to do that. I have to move the wine because there are some, i.e. pumping it out of a barrel, putting it in another barrel, whatever. So I
Oxidizing.
Yeah.
People will fill up a big tank with wine and they will line the bottom of it with these stave sets, and they will mimic the amount of oak influence that might become on that wine, but they're not going to ever mimic the evaporation that happens in a barrel.
And just
And that's really the
process of living in a barrel, the polymerization that occurs, just this living, breathing thing that happens inside of a barrel.
The micro-oxidization that happens in the barrel is really what makes these wines richer, fuller, so on and so forth. The oak influence is there. And I think, yes, generally speaking, French, Hungarian, American, we use it. You could go into a longer conversation. And I think that even then, these proprietary styles of barrels change the French oak conversation even more so.
And forests.
Yeah.
Different forests of French oak. We could do this exact same tasting all with French oak, but different forests, for instance.
Yeah. So I think that like anything, oak is a tool, and I think we utilize it to the best to accentuate our wines.
And with great power comes great responsibility.
Wow.
And on that note, so if we can start diving into aromatics on the American oaked coconut.
Almond Joy's got nuts. Toasted coconut.
You know what? One of the staple descriptors of American oak that you will always hear if you're working with it is dill. I get it right off the bat. You guys getting that?
Yes, although I'll say that I think in some ways that has also changed over time.
Yeah.
I think 15, 20 years ago, if you taste cabs from Napa from that era, dill is really prevalent.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of viewed like green bell pepper in cabs.
Yep.
Like Monterey and parts of California that were cooler really suffered from this kind of negative perception that they were too green and bell peppery, and they struggled with that. I think dill was one of those characters in American oak. Mm-hmm. The funny thing is, to me, if cab doesn't have a little bell pepper, it's not cab.
Right.
And to me, American oak, I'd like to see a little bit. I just don't want it to be dominant. I think American oak these days, and this comes from a company called Staven, and they have really high quality American oak. I think it's subtle in its background, and I really like it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and it is a kind of a nuance to it that I am pointing out immediately. So I would not say that that's what I get right off the bat, but I am also jumping into what kind of separates this.
What are the classics?
Yeah. And again, just to clarify, you guys, these are all wines that have been aged in neutral oak barrels. Most of these neutral oak barrels are French, am I correct?
Right.
That are in
our barrel room.
Yeah, most of it.
With stave set inserts that are going into our neutral barrels. So that was just a question that seemed to make sense right away. Eric, you want to
Yeah, you know, I mean,
go for the nose on that one?
I said this a little bit earlier, but one of some, Corey mentioned coconut, you mentioned dill. I always get this kind of confection, marshmallowy kind of, you know, I get circus peanuts a lot. You know, those little orange peanuts that are real gooey and you eat them, they give them in the bags. I get circus peanuts and a sweet confectionery side of this, like spun sugar, just.
I think also you get different notes the more you toast stuff. You know, we buy these sets in medium toast, medium plus toast, heavy toast, and I think there's different.
Yeah, for those of you
Different things
watching,
that change, yeah.
toasting is simply how much, none of these are just raw wood. We're not aging in barrels that are just wood. We're not inserting staves inside of barrels that are just wood. All these woods are cured for years, and there's a whole long story about that. And then they're actually toasted to different levels, and depending on how much you toast them, you get different flavors out of it. And it's, think of it like the spice rack in your kitchen. You have different spices that you use on different dishes. That's what we do with these oaks. And like Corey said, it's really complex. You have terroir of where the tree grows, the ecology of that forest. You have the species of that tree. Then you have, what were the weather conditions like? When was it harvested? And then how is that
How long was
aged?
it cured?
How is it cured?
Yeah.
And then how is that toasted and built into a barrel? So this is a whole nother world of winemaking, essentially.
Yeah, it's basically the spice rack of winemaking. I think the fruit is your raw ingredients. I think the oak is kind of like your spice rack. I think a lot of people overspice their food. And that's kind of like what oak is. People use too much oak and it just ends up tasting like you said earlier, like salt or pepper or whatever. And there's this range of things you could get. I love like heavy toasted French oak personally. Because you get more cinnamon and dark stuff, and it just depends. There's no smoke.
So we can kind of bring it back to this wine right here specifically, and kind of, Corey, do you want to maybe point out what you're getting on the nose of this wine?
Yeah, the first thing I go for whenever I smell any wine is always fruit first, and I think you still get the black cherry fruit, you still get these underlying things, but what is the oak bringing to the table? And I think toasted coconut. I get a lot of toasted coconut. I get a lot of like fresh cut sawn wood, like wood, sugar, pine sap, those kind of things.
I get a bit of this graham cracker.
I can see that.
Sure.
Yeah. Cookies.
Yeah. What's funny is just kind of personal side note here. When I moved to Arizona about 10 years ago and didn't really know much about wine, I started working for Merkin Vineyards and then transitioned from Merkin Vineyards in the field, trainings, working in-house basically alongside Corey in our tasting room. And, I'm losing my train of thought here. So, I was trying to think of,
What's also really interesting is how your perception, as wines evolve over time, and then your perception of wines evolve over time.
Very much so.
Like in some ways it's amazing and wonderful, in other ways it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much harder for a wine to get me excited now than 20 years ago. I've been making wine for 24 years now, and it's kind of a bummer because back then, 20 years ago, every wine was this huge epiphany, like, oh my God.
Monolithic.
Yeah. And now I'm just like,
Well, it sucks because you can see through, you can kind of see through.
Yeah, okay, right back to me. So what I wanted to say is I kind of learned about wine in Arizona with Arizona Wine and kind of used that as a stepping stone to move into international wines, and really got into it here at Page Springs and really couldn't learn much about oak and oak flavors from Page Springs, to be honest. And Corey, as I mentioned earlier, is the founder and co-owner of Burning Tree Cellars, and they have always had a lot more oak influence. And I remember when I first started to smell oak on wines, thinking these smell like burning tree wines to me. And what they always kind of reminded me of was my mom making sweet baked goods, essentially like cookies, a lot of like, the graham cracker thing was kind of part of it, vanilla extract,
High crust.
high
ginger
crust is a
snaps.
huge one, cocoa influences, so if you guys aren't as tuned into oak, this obviously should help or hopefully help.
Dig into your past. What is
Yeah, but definitely connection you have to these flavors, or just your personal.
Invokes memories.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I mean, for me, I was kind of I'm kind of like a hybrid of what you guys. Early on in my career, I used to be a sommelier in a restaurant. And I always gravitated towards these heavy oaked, rich wines, and I always associated that with quality. And then now that I'm a winemaker, now I make the wine and I see what oak influences does with wine. And like going back to what Eric was saying, it's like I don't gravitate towards these wines anymore. It's actually more the opposite, because for me, you start to realize that a lot of these flavors and textures are really a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it's just like, do I want a wine to taste like a barrel, or do I want it to taste like a grape? And that's a big thing, and you can have a little bit of both, and I think that it's finding the balance between the two, but I don't gravitate towards well, I still do. It depends on what I'm doing. It depends on what I'm doing, but I love, but at the same time, I love wines that don't see any oak in it, and wines that are super crisp and like Grand Cru Chablis or Muscadets from the coast of France, like wines that are completely nerdy and weird. And I think oak is just another part of this. And before it used to be a bigger part, but now it's more like.
Well, and Burning Tree, and the thing I'll add is Burning Tree wines are more oaked, but also Burning Tree wines are generally more extracted and bigger too. So it also gets back to the whole concept of balance.
Right.
We said earlier, you're not going to hammer a delicate red fruit-driven wine with very little tannin with a really heavy oak. But in my experience, Corey's wines and Burning Tree are generally bigger, richer, more extracted, and it can handle more oak too.
Right.
So
they're not just oak.
Yeah, it's about balance, and you can balance like Rosenblum Zins, big ass Zins can handle more of this sweet American oak because they're huge, So it's all about balance really and appropriateness.
Wasn't trying to box a brand in there.
No, not at all. I didn't say that. But no, I mean, I think wine is a singular experience, and enjoying wine and finding wines that you like. I mean, that's what this is all about. It's a journey, and no one's going to tell you you're wrong. I'm definitely not going to say, you're not going to come in here and I'm like, you shouldn't like heavy oaked wines. I think people should just like whatever they like, and I think that's the most important thing. Just enjoy wine. Oh God.
So before we go there, you guys mind jumping into your tasting notes on the American oaked?
The palate.
Yep, on the palate.
I mean, we kind of jumped around the nose. So the nose now we've been talking coconuts, circus peanuts, dill, graham crackers. I think confections.
I think it follows through in the palate as well.
I think so too. It's actually for me, one of the hallmarks of a great wine is, does the nose carry through to the palate? Or is it completely disjunct?
Yep.
So if I smell something on the palate, I'm like, oh my God, this is so good, and I don't get on the nose, I'm like, eh. We actually had that with Pinot.
Yeah, we did.
We were sitting on a beach in California. We're both like, oh my God, this nose is
We're
beautiful.
both like picking up pebbles and searching for pebbles for 2
Beautiful
hours.
little stones on this beach, and we're drinking Pinot. And both of us felt like the palate did not stand up to the nose at all.
The nose was great, the palate was thin,
And to me, this carries through really nicely.
Yeah.
So
all of these.
a lot of the same characters for sure.
Yeah, I get on the palate on the American oak wine, I'm getting a bit of this cola influence on the palate that I wasn't necessarily getting on the French or the this is the American, correct?
Yeah.
So compared to the French and Hungarian, I'm getting this almost like this cherry Coke kind of
I agree. I was
cola.
getting like a sarsaparilla, and then also I was getting a what are those? It's like a Tootsie Roll?
Yep.
Kind of?
Yeah.
Which I associate with American Oak a lot too.
Yeah,
Weird mocha.
sarsaparilla, I think, is a great little note on that.
Root beer.
Yep, which does come off kind of a little bit root beer like. Anyone tuning in from the East Coast, if you've ever grabbed a little twig off sarsaparilla and chewed it, that's where that brings you right there.
Chicory, and the thing is too, the longer you spend with the wine, I would actually, if you guys haven't done this yet, my glass is empty.
I'll get there.
What Corey was talking about earlier is super important. We love to take an empty glass and dry out the contents on the rim, on the edges, not the rim, and then get back in there. You're going to notice a whole other group of aromatics that you didn't get when the wine was wet.
A lot more raw wood.
Yeah,
What did you guys do with the rest of yours?
it's in my belly. But
Rhetorical
right
question.
now, I mean, this is really pretty. I'm getting tons of baking spices, cinnamon and nutmeg.
Oh man,
Yeah, right? It's so neat.
So pretty.
real nutty
Yeah.
almond.
And I love smelling. I try to
Do that with a Hungarian. I love Hungarian oak.
Big fan. So if we can do this, I'd love to just kind of do a quick side by side. So, I have my French and my Hungarian. If I get a little more American, if we could fill up our glasses and see what happens if we go back and forth between these.
I drank more than you.
For any of you guys,
across the street.
for any of you guys who noticed a little cut out in our live stream there,
Thanks, man.
that is a friend of mine trying to call me repetitively on my cell phone, which is what we're filming from. So hopefully we are back. We're back, right, guys? Yep,
What happened to the video? Yeah, someone cut us off.
that's right. I'll I don't know how you prevent that.
Yeah, yeah.
French beer.
Looking a little more Frenchy good.
For those of you guys following, if you guys can just confirm that we're back up and you guys can hear us and see us and all that. Great.
What a plan works out. 2 years later. Yeah, which is probably not close.
All right, so we are back.
Actually, the French is
Awesome.
has opened up a ton. Again, I mean, you guys have all experienced this.
God.
It's
So good.
when
So
you-
good.
right?
Yeah, I think the French is now my favorite.
What's funny is it's almost like, oh, that one's my favorite. Oh, the next
The
one's
amount
my
of wine
favorite.
you've had, or?
Totally.
Tannin fatigue is not the only fatigue that's happening.
Harper Johnson letting us know.
Hey,
Oh,
hey,
Harper.
Hi, Cynthia. Hi, Harper. Good people. Oh, you.
They're all right.
Yeah. So any of you who have purchased the sets that we are connecting to these virtual tastings, you would have hopefully received Private Preserve. It's an argon nitrogen blend spray that we use to get additional days out of our bottles. In general, we open this bottle, say we drink a third of it, next day we drink another third, day 3 we're drinking another third. The wine's going to change a lot, and honestly, it may get better on day 2 or day 3. It just depends on the wine and where that apex is. When you're home and maybe it's 1 or 2 of you, and you open 3 bottles, you're probably going to want a handful of days to be able to make it through. So this is just simply a spray that we apply to our bottles if they are unfinished and we want to extend that aging. It basically just creates a blanket of a gas that you can't see that would protect or act as a buffer from oxygen reaching your wine. So what it's doing is it's just creating a zone.
Picture these are untoasted staves right here. And see how they have little holes in the end? Maybe you can see that. And what we do is in little sets of 3, these all get a food grade cord of nylon. and the total number of staves we insert, if you insert a full set. In particular, though, these are very special because next year, what you'll likely see, or maybe the year after, is an oak set like this that will have Arizona oak as one of the components. We've been pioneering Arizona oak for years. These are actually Arizona oak staves. This is untoasted Arizona white oak from the Mingus Mountain Range behind Jerome, okay? And these are ones that are toasted. These were actually toasted after arduously cleaning our pizza oven. Actually, our chef did that, obviously. We toast these to a
Do you?
I don't know that
below your pay grade?
I do not know how to clean a pizza oven. Different people at different times on both white wines and red wines, and this toast level, which we're calling
So we
low and slow.
what we did was we mimicked the aging capability of different oaks. We took French oak staves, we took American oak staves, we took Arizona oak staves, and we took Hungarian staves, and we cut them up and we put them in mason jars, and we did different wines in these mason jars. Let them sit for a week.
We did a full year of aging in 1 week based on the concentration.
We came back and we tasted them, and the Arizona oak won every time, and this was blind tasting. We didn't know even what we were going into, so we're super excited about it. And you know, and back to this, like, why don't make an Arizona barrel? Well, oak trees in Arizona are little scrub oaks. You know, there's no way you're going to make barrels out of these things. And you know, back to
Well, they can be big trees, but they're really knotty, and it's hard to make a whole barrel.
Yeah. So dry, arid climate, you're going to get super tight grain like French. But I think it's such a unique flavor profile and aromatic profile that's super, super interesting. Like,
Well, you know,
tons of baking spices.
Well, and back to our original point, everybody, the idea here is that it always struck me as strange. Okay, here's our best wine. Let's put it in our best barrel. It's some French barrel, and let's now make this wine taste like a wine that came from France because it's highly influenced by their oak.
Or whoever else bought that barrel.
Yeah, so the idea is, how do we create wines that are truly, truly from a place? And now that we're aging wines on our own oak, we've kind of closed the loop, and we have 100% terroir-driven Arizona wines. And some of the quick characters from this is, like, we're getting these wonderful, like, you know, when you get one of those high-end chocolates that have caramel inside with sea salt on it,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's one of the biggest characters of this oak, this wonderful dark caramel, brown
Chocolate.
caramel. Yeah,
Yeah, like
chocolate.
dark, bittersweet chocolate. I also get a lot of baking spices too. Like, I don't know, for me, it's like I love Hungarian because I feel like it's kind of between French and American. And I tend to like the flavor profile of French oak, the aromatics of French oak, but sometimes it's a little too astringent, a little too tannic, and that's why I kind of lean Hungarian. But sometimes Hungarian's too sweet. I mean, to me, Arizona kind of falls between Hungarian and French, you know, texturally speaking, and they're aromatic. So, and I'm not trying to blow smoke of anyone's ass here, or, you know, yeah, I think it's one of the coolest things that, you know, it's just a long line of cool things that I've experienced here working with Eric and at Page Springs. This is just another thing we're doing that I think is really going to make our wines unique.
Yeah, keep an eye out.
Excited.
You'll see labels. Right now, these have a little acorn on it to talk about the oak set. It'll have a little acorn on it with something that'll let you know that it's Arizona oak in the future.
Yeah, we talked about maybe doing a color flag.
Yeah, like an Arizona flag inside of an acorn.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Or instead of the star, do
Just
the
wanted to show
acorn.
these guys the acorn there. So to kind of bring it back, guys, would you say that the promise of this Arizona Oak program, do you think that'll take us away from French, Hungarian, and American? I mean, I guess it is American Oak.
I think, you know, right now, French is probably the oak we use the most, and Hungarian, then American. I think it will go strongly, you know, 2/3 Arizona,
Maybe with some French.
a little bit of French,
Yeah.
a little bit of Hungarian.
But once again, like we were saying, all these oaks, irrelevant where they're from. I mean, obviously, ideologically, we want to use more American oak, but all these oaks are different ways that we might want a little more sweetness, a a little more aromatic, so on and so forth. We're really in love with the Arizona stuff, and I think that's going to highly influence a lot of these wines going forward. But we're not scared to use other oaks, or we're not pushed away from doing so.
So it's what makes the best wine, that, complexity, balance, harmony, and expression of place. If for some reason we feel like the Arizona oak isn't doing it, then we won't use it. I mean, it's always about the wine.
We don't discriminate.
I mean, one of our mantras here for years and years has always been what's best for the wine. It doesn't mean you have to work that extra 12 hours after you've already worked 24. What's best for the wine, and we'll do that. That's what
Clean the
we do.
press.
Yeah.
Or the pizza oven. At this point, what I would love to do, and we can kind of not necessarily burn through these, but there's quite a few, so kind of move through them, is address some of the questions that showed up. While we're doing this, if you guys happen to have any questions that you want to throw at us, now would be the time as we kind of open this up to a little bit of a Q&A before we wrap things up.
Our friend Alexandria out of New Orleans was asking what favorite cooperage, if we have a favorite cooperage.
Yeah. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I like Burgundian coopers a lot, and I've visited a number of coopers or barrel makers in Burgundy in France. Kind of one of the seminal coopers is Francois Frères. Francois Frères, they're actually kind of a bigger cooperage. They're really prolific in the wine industry throughout the world, but they just have incredibly amazing sourcing programs. They number one get great oak. They have a great aging program there, and they are meticulous coopers.
Yeah,
So
quality.
I would say Francois Frères is one of the tops. I like some small coopers like Mercure and Marcenay. We haven't had
I
Marcenay.
say Burgundy.
Yeah.
Barrels.
Yeah, because back to Burgundy coopers, we like oak that is subtle, and a lot of these coopers kind of developed their barrel making around Pinot Noir and Chardonnay.
Yeah.
So
So for me, I think it depends on the wine. I think if you're doing Bordeaux, like I love Picard, I love Taranceau is one of my favorites. I love Frères. Sarug is actually, I think, a very versatile barrel for both whites and reds, both tropical for whites, spice for reds. I don't know. I think there's a ton of them that I like.
American oak, I would say, Barrel Associates, Sagan Moreau, Demtos.
Demtos is right.
The American Demtos is really Francois Frères US.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, there you go. Makes sense.
So you guys, I love you all, but I drank a ton of coffee before this. I'll be right back.
I would say that my favorite Cooper is either Alice Cooper or Cooper's Hawk.
Hanging with Coopers.
How
How about Cooper from the Lakers, man?
Coop!
No, you missed that one.
Follow-up question from our friend.
Get through there, man.
From our friend in New Orleans is whether that we're getting these barrels shipped in whole from France.
Yeah, well, it depends on what we're talking about here. A lot of times, because of our style, we don't want to buy a lot of brand new French oak. We'll buy a couple barrels to augment a larger blend, just because we don't want these wines to be over a particular style of wood. But that's 1 or 2 barrels we buy a year. Brand new French oak. Generally speaking, we buy twice used Chardonnay barrels because the Chardonnay doesn't really influence the barrel too much. And we roll those into our program. So it depends. We have a lot of barrels here. We don't buy a lot of new barrels every year. We have barrels here from 1997 that we're still using because we're still getting the evaporative properties that we're looking for. Once again, back to not having barrels influence the wine too much. A lot of these are neutral barrels. So as long as we keep them clean, we'll use them again and again, so on and so forth.
Can I get just 20 seconds of your time to answer temperatures of drinking wines? Do you have can you just give a temperature for white and a temperature for red?
Yeah, they're a lot closer than people think. I actually like my white wines in the mid to high 50s. The stuff I like to drink the coldest is probably champagnes. Dry champagnes at maybe in the high 40s, low 50s. White wines are generally mid 50s to up to 60, depends on the wine. If it's a really big, heavy Chardonnay, I kind of like a little more expression. Red wines, I generally like to, I keep my cellar around 55. So if I pull a white wine out, it might it'll be ready to open right away. If I want to let it open up, I'll decant it or I'll let the bottle sit there. Get up to about where it starts smelling better and it starts tasting better. So just stay away from the 70s. That's all I can say for any wine.
I would say I agree with that, and dessert wines is the one thing I would plug in there. Typically for me with dessert wines, kind of the higher the sweetness, which is not necessarily the higher the sugar, because that has to do with your acid balance in that, but kind of the sweeter the wine, typically the colder I like to drink it at.
Aging the same on these 3 different wines? Do you
Yeah,
think that
so
there's kind of
no, there's not much difference here. We bottled these all the same day, and we added the oak. We did staves on all these. So we went through, and this was a pretty large lot. 2018 and 19 was or 2017 was pretty abundant vintage, and we had quite a bit of fruit. And and why did we choose Syrah? And this is a good question too, even though I asked it myself. Thanks, Self. No, I think that Syrah is a great carrier, and it's not going to overpower stuff. We already said that, but we just had a lot of it, and so we sat there and said, "Hey, we actually bottled 7 different 470 Syrahs this particular year." So for us, we're always striving to have diversity, and that's one of the most important things I think for our palates, for our experience in this
Keep it
thing.
interesting.
Yeah, life is supposed to be diverse, and this is why we did this. So I'm glad that this is the first time I tasted it, and I think they're all pretty tasty.
So diversity is your answer to how long these can age.
No, you said how long can we age them on wood all at the same time? 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and just to really answer that question, the question was
I'm going back to
I'm going to tape. The question was is there a variance in ageability of these wines post bottling in the state that you're seeing them here?
Depending on oak. Is that wine going to age better?
More ageable than that wine? That's the question. And I really don't see.
I mean, the French might be, slightly. For me, it has a little more tannin than the other ones, and tannin tends to be an antioxidant, which tends to prolong aging. So maybe the French has a slight edge as far as ageability, but I would say they're all very similar, and I would say this wine in general is like in the 5 to 7 range.
Perfect.
Is where I would guess it would peak.
Another question is about our 2017 vintage. I don't really want to jump into this too deep, but Eric, do you maybe want to touch on a 30-second evaluation of 2017 as a vintage?
Yeah, I would say above average, but not like knock it out of the park. In the last, since we started here, which was 2000 and what was our first vintage was 2006, but we've been making wine here since 2004. I would say the great vintages, 14 still stands out as our top vintage.
Cool.
Yeah, it was a cooler year. I think 12 and 10 were both great, but not as great as 14. And I would say that 19 currently is really phenomenal.
Yeah.
17 was a little bit on the warmer than average side, and which will generally give us wines that are a little richer and a little higher in alcohol. All of these, by the way, you guys have the bottles in front of you, are 14.3% alcohol, which is a little on the high side for us, which tends to suggest a warmer vintage, more heat, more ripeness, higher alcohol, more sugar, more alcohol. But I would say that it's a vintage that favored Syrah for sure. And I think we had very strong, powerful Syrahs from that year. And I think they're going to be ageable.
Yeah.
We had another question in about vegan wines versus organic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to just kind of take that one briefly. Essentially, and maybe oversimplified, we farm organically, and then there are certain practices within the cellar, mainly based on the longevity of our product, that are inorganic. And that process is, you guys feel like I'm safe to say that process is what safely
promotes 99% of the wine industry onto shelves and into wine cellars and so on.
I think you need like sulfite use and
Yep,
such, for
yep.
instance.
Yeah, and the process,
I think
the process
sulfite
that we're
use- I
talking
think
about is sulfite influence.
I mean,
Are we talking about sulfites or are we talking about
vegan.
vegan?
Well, I mean, number one, if the idea of a vegan wine is that it hasn't seen animal products,
Yeah.
the only animal products that would ever come in contact with our wine would be fining agents.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly rare. But if you're really, if you're a very strict vegan, you should always call us and ask us. But I would say over 10 years, maybe 1 to 3% of our wines have probably seen products that are non-vegan. And then back to the idea of organic. To be certified organic, you have to have less than 100 parts per million sulfur dioxide added to a wine during its life. What is sulfur dioxide? It's an antioxidant and it's antimicrobial. Okay, yeast, whenever they ferment, produce small amounts of sulfites, and they're in every wine on the planet unless you remove them through an oxidative process. We test. I'm very sensitive to sulfites, so I would say a lot of our wines, actually with the exception of whites, are generally speaking underneath the limit to be called organic. We just haven't bothered with certification. Generally speaking, white wines have higher sulfite levels because there are things in red wines that are also very strong antioxidants, like color molecules and tannins, and white wines generally don't have those. And furthermore, we don't put our white wines through our secondary fermentation often, which is malolactic fermentation. One of the ways you inhibit malolactic fermentation is with sulfites. So if you're looking for something organic, generally red wines more so, and just remember that white wines generally have their sulfite levels than red wines.
But we still use less sulfites than the majority of wines out there in the world because we're moving them around so little. Like most of our wines qualify as organic, period. But the red tape's not worth getting the stamp.
All right, next question from Ruben O is wondering about sherry. You guys know about any sherry being produced in the state of Arizona?
I know about brandy.
Not on purpose.
No. We've made sherry here and there. Most winemakers have made sherry here and there. We don't make
I love sherries of all styles, Finos up to
Oh, you know who?
Olorosos, Montiatos.
Now that I asked the question, I believe that Keith Joshua
Makes a sherry.
or Manny at Keith Joshua. No, I'm pretty sure he
Does it on purpose?
Yeah, I believe so. Maybe I'm wrong there, but
Sherry's a whole other process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's something that requires, it's kind of controlled spoilage. And you
Yeah.
really need to know what you're doing to create the right realm of spoilage or oxidation in those wines. And so
You
that-
easily screwed up.
I don't know anybody personally, but it'd be awesome if somebody started doing it.
Yeah.
Short answer on a Coravin system. Someone's asking about a Coravin system, which is essentially a way to tap into your wine in your bottle without opening it. It's a needle system that is inserted through your cork. That is a hollow needle that allows that wine to escape through the needle so you can taste it without actually pulling your cork, and the cork actually reforms back and reseals your bottle there. So,
And it replaces the headspace with it.
and it actually inserts like a similar gas to what we were talking about earlier. If you can just keep it short, that answer.
Yeah, I think it depends on what kind of size bottle you're drinking, but I never have a problem putting down that 750. I think it's very, it's a thing that, like anything, I think it's a great thing. It allows people to, but more in a restaurant setting, to try maybe a glass of something that they couldn't afford by the bottle. And I think there's certain things that I think it's great for, but not for my house. I mean, because we're going to pop a cork, we're going to drink that bottle. That's just how we work. I think it's a great system, and I think it allows, like if I go to a restaurant and I'm like, I want to try a glass of Chateau Margaux, and I'm going to pay a couple $100 for this glass, it's better than buying a bottle for $800. And I think it's a cool thing that allows people to do that. I don't know the efficacy or how well it works or anything like that to really comment on it any further.
we'll call it that. We do use a Corbin in our tasting room to be able to check on our library reserve bottles without having to completely, dedicate the entire bottle there. An answer from both of you guys on a summer white wine suggestion. Eric, do you maybe want to keep that answer to Page Springs bottles, and Corey, and if you want to take it, and Corey, if you want to, outside of Page Springs, could be Arizona, could be international.
Yeah, I think really, I think Eric's going to say the same thing. I'm going to say. I
No,
think,
it's not.
You came up. Good.
okay, here we go.
White wine suggestion.
I think anything with high acid minerality, things you can serve cold.
I'm looking for a producer and potential vintage.
So I'm gonna talk, I'll talk about Page Springs. Right now, if Rod Keeling's still watching, we have an amazing pig pull block that we made from his vineyard, fresh, lime zest, high acid, quintessential pig pull block. Also, we've got 5 different dry rosés right now, 3 from the Calibri vineyard, and we have our classic La Flor Rosa, and we have our Counoise Rosé from House Mountain. The rosés right now are phenomenal. We've got the best, most delicious, refreshing lineup of rosés we've ever made since we've opened our door.
Yeah, I mean, he said white, but if I can go into the rosé spectrum, yeah, that's the best summer wine. For me, I drink that wine no matter. So all the rosés we made here this year, the rosés we made for Burning Tree. I mean, they check all the boxes for me for enjoying wine and heat.
Sweet, love it. Eric Lookoff asking you, I believe it's an old buddy of yours, will the smoking jacket come back? Not the actual jacket, the wine.
Right. The biggest challenge with Smoking Jacket is that we don't grow our own cab. Cabernet Sauvignon, that is. So, and of course, Smoking Jacket's a blend of Mourvedre and Cabernet Sauvignon. I would like to. It's definitely one of my favorite blends of all time. The scant amount of cab that we have is generally going into Golomsky cab. But we did borrow a little bit of, a couple others here and there, but a little bit from
Bonita
Coronado,
Springs,
Bonita.
Coronado.
So the short answer is, I would think so.
Yeah, I think maybe. I think every single one of these wines speak to us, and I think at any given time we're going to emphasize on the wine being a single expression of a place over a blend. So it depends.
So if the cab is great on its own, it's not going to get blended, which is why Smoking Jacket hasn't happened in a few years. Just like why hasn't ESIPs happened?
No spice.
ESIPs hasn't happened because we've had warmer vintages and we haven't had super spicy wines. 19, we might see ESIPs come back. We'll see.
Smoking Jacket, in case you aren't aware of it, is a wine that we produce that is historically Cab and Mourvedre, am I correct?
Yeah.
And 2014 vintage Smoking Jacket is kind of
Unbelievable.
hard to beat
So
when
good.
it comes to Page Springs wines, if you happen to have that. Just to tackle the last remaining questions, are the ones that we can manage. Ruben O is asking us, do you think buttery Chardonnay and bourbon barrel trail trend will infest Arizona? I'm happy to take that one on. I think infest is an interesting term. Will it actually,
Influence.
will it be here? I think the answer is yes. I think that we are just prolifically growing as an industry, and the more that grows, the more of chance of any
Diversity.
is going to be presented. And the bourbon barrel question is without getting too far into it, is wines being aged in bourbon barrels, which is to me just almost a completely different product. I don't think I've seen that in Arizona. We've done some influence with our brandy production. We've done a little influence with smoke taint coming from forest fire influence through barrels and so on. But really, to answer your question, I would say yes, simply because of the rate of growth within this industry.
Can I add?
Yeah, go for it. As long as
I'll be quick.
it's not
Pertaining to the buttery, heavily oaked Chardonnays, I think that of course is going to happen because I think that's just a stylistic decision that people like. We don't necessarily go down that road, but it's going to happen. is already happening. Pertaining to bourbon barrel aged stuff, we actually just aged a brandy barrel aged Petite Sirah that has a lot of bourbon-esque influence. So yeah, it's happening.
Yeah, it is happening.
It's happening. Final question to land, just to reiterate, our good buddy Andrea Brody is asking AZ Oak and the forecast on that. Eric, you mind giving us I know you did just a second ago, but maybe just a ballpark figure of when that next round of
I think
available bottles.
I think 19s, you're gonna see a fair number of bottlings. Both blends and single vineyard wines with Arizona.
Yep, and so he means the 2019 vintage, which is basically what is in-house at the moment and going to bottle soon. And those wines, you think seasonally, can you give us like a spring, fall of what year you think those will be?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand it's a tiered release, but
I think you'll start seeing them in September of this year. So you'll see 19 wines coming out in September or the fall of 2020. Yeah.
that are open for us, you think?
I think so. I think we're gonna start dropping those in a number of places.
I think we have to move through some stuff though first.
But I mean, as far as sales.
No, I'm saying
Yeah.
as far as like, when do they see the Arizona wines? I think probably another 6 months to a year from now, you'll start seeing them slowly bleeding into our releases. We're going to put something on the label that definitely expresses, hey, this is Arizona Oak.
You'll know
you'll
it's
know.
Arizona Oak. Yeah.
yeah, so just to kind of wrap things up here, guys, for any of you who followed this without any of these wines in front of you, hopefully you had something else to be sipping on throughout that. But really what's happened for us here in Arizona is our temperatures have gone up across the state, but really the influence on us is the Phoenix Valley, which is the hub to all of our wine that ships out. Any web order, any club shipment that goes out typically goes through Phoenix. So as the temperatures down there have increased, we have basically had to cut off our shipping. What we just recently decided to do was start a drop program in the Phoenix Valley area, which is all listed on our website with maps showing where we're going to actually be delivering our wines to. Again, we're not doing a door-to-door service. We are doing a pickup point system with, I believe, 5 different locations throughout the valley, with time windows at each one of those where we're actually going to be delivering our wines to where you would be able to pick them up. So if you guys do want to participate in these further down the road, it's a matter of looking into our drop zone program and figuring that out. We're basically doing that weekly. And there's a lot of information on our website, which is pagespringcellars.com, that will give you our time windows,
We're dropping
locations.
right now. We're dropping on every Thursday evenings.
and exactly what it's also going to show you is the deadline of when you have to order that wine by. That will allow the time for us to put that order together, run it down there, and have it for you available. So again, our website is where you're going to want to look for that information. We're doing these every weekend from here on out. So if you're with us now and want to join us for those, we'd love to have you. We're moving on to some signature sets that we produce. We're doing a rosé session. I believe Eric and I are going to travel down to our remote vineyard called Colibri down south and do a shoot from down there. We're still kind of working out the details on a lot of that, but this is all listed on our website, which we continually update. And any information on these virtual tastings, that is where you're going to want to look on our pagespringcellars.com site. The next session that we're doing, I believe will just be Eric and I. We are tasting through the Familia set. We're going to taste through the Familia Blanca and the Vino de la Familia, which are long-running signature labels of ours. That is coming up on May 9th, which is a week from today. Similar kind of It'll probably be about a 2-hour session, hour and a half long session or so. What you guys got?
Ta-da!
Real quick, the gentleman's asking is Page Spring Cellars open for Cinco de Mayo?
That's Ruben.
That is Ruben asking us right there. So, Luke.
I'm going to comment here. So number one, you guys, we are not open per se, and we won't be for a bit longer. We do have our to-go window open, so you can come and get bottles of wine. You can open them yourself. You can get food to go. We've dispersed seating throughout our property, so you can go enjoy that wine down the river. You can sit in the vineyard in a variety of places with significant social distance. Having said that, if you've read the governor's latest order, retail businesses will start opening on the 8th, and we're expecting next week to see some new directives regarding restaurants and bars. And we assume that we're going to start seeing a phased-in approach where we'll open our tasting room, but at lower capacity, occupancy than previous. So hopefully, that is not going to happen by May 5th. But you can still come and enjoy our place and grab bottles to go and enjoy the outdoors. It's absolutely gorgeous here right now. It's cooler than the valley. The river is flowing. It's beautiful. So come and join us, and just know that we probably won't see any of the classic openings occurring for another couple weeks.
We're excited. We're excited for this to all settle and for us to go back to our normal ways. This is fun. It's exciting for us to do this. It's different. It's new. And hopefully we'll continue doing this even when things kind of settle back into place. But on that note, maybe a final cheers with everybody. If you guys still happen to have any wine, I know Aaron and Lacey, I think they may have already polished. There's almost the Bree is the only one who's really going to get that. So,
you guys, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate all your support all these years. And share wine with friends. We all need it right now.
Thanks for joining us, guys. Hope to see you guys next week, 5:30 p.m. on May 9th. We will be back live. We are not doing Instagram, a number of different reasons. The real simple answer is you can't shoot landscape. We would have to go portrait mode with our camera on this, which is a real simple deterrent, oddly. But again, we'll be back live on Facebook. We'll be live on YouTube. This video will also be loaded onto our YouTube page. So if you want to share this with anybody or send links around, our previous shoots are also already uploaded onto that site as well. So again, thank you guys for joining us. Eric, Corey, thanks for joining us as well.
Big thanks to both Quail, our distributor, who's one of our drop points, and Wilderness Brewing Company. Both their Gilbert and their downtown locations are two of our other drop points. Awesome people. So think about drinking their beer over at Wilderness as well. They're doing all kinds of to-go programs.
All I can say is stay safe. Love you guys. Burning Tree's open too.
Thank you guys.
They get really get better.